The August heat in Willow Creek didn't just warm the air, it pressed down on you, thick and suffocating. That day, a Tuesday, was a perfect example, the kind of day where the asphalt shimmered and the only sound was the drone of cicadas trying to bake themselves into oblivion. I just finished a brutal 12-hour shift. If you know, you know. The starch in a deputy sheriff's uniform feels like sandpaper after that long, and the vest might as well be woven steel. All I wanted was a cold shower, a mediocre microwaved dinner, and 2 hours of glorious, brain-dead silence before doing it all again. I pulled my personal car, a deceptively plain dark gray sedan, the kind that blends into any suburb, into my driveway. I live in a quiet, manicured development where the grass is always 3 inches exactly and the HOA covenants are thicker than the phone book. I parked, killed the engine, and leaned my head back against the rest for a long moment, the scent of stale coffee and the sharp, metallic tang of an official car interior still clinging to me. I was wearing my street clothes now, but my heart rate hadn't quite slowed down from the last 911 call, a domestic dispute that had threatened to go sideways fast. I grabbed my gym bag and my briefcase, which contained my badge, my ID, and a sheaf of very sensitive paperwork, and opened the door. That's when I heard it, a small, almost imperceptible tink. It was the sound of metal meeting metal close by, and it was followed by a sharp, frustrated sigh. I paused, one foot on the baking concrete, my senses immediately snapping to high alert, a reflex that never truly turns off. I scanned my own car, then the street, then my neighbor's yard. And there she was, Carol. If you lived in Willow Creek, you knew Carol. She wasn't just a neighbor. She was the reigning, self-appointed queen of the HOA board, a woman whose entire personality seemed to be molded from pure, unadulterated entitlement and a complete lack of basic human decency. She was standing right next to my sedan, hunched over the driver's side door. What she was doing next to my car, I couldn't immediately figure out. She was dressed in her standard uniform, immaculate white capri pants, a vibrant, floral-patterned top that clashed violently with everything, and oversized sunglasses perched on her nose like she was inspecting a felony. Her perfectly coiffed hair was practically glowing under the harsh afternoon sun. But it was the object in her hand that made the blood run cold in my veins and the adrenaline start pumping. It was a heavy-looking, crudely shaped piece of metal, a tool that definitely did not belong in the hand of a suburban grandmother. "Can I help you, Carol?" I asked, my voice flat, drained of any emotion. I kept my hand subtly near my side, a subconscious reminder of the training that taught me to assess a threat before engaging. She jumped about a foot, dropping the strange metal object with a clatter. It landed near the wheel well, and I caught a glimpse of it. It looked suspiciously like a slightly modified, heavy-duty flathead screwdriver, or maybe a poorly filed locksmith's pick. She quickly bent down to scoop it up, her face a mask of sudden, frantic confusion that quickly morphed into her default expression of smug superiority. She straightened up, holding the tool behind her back like a child caught with their hand in the cookie jar. "Oh, Michael, I didn't see you there. Honestly, I didn't realize you were home. I was just checking on your vehicle." She didn't even try to make eye contact. She was inspecting a point just above my left ear. I took a deliberate step closer, and my eyes dropped to the door panel. Right near the keyhole, there was a faint, fresh scratch, a tiny silver-white line against the dark gray paint. My stomach twisted with a sickening combination of disbelief and rage. "Checking on it how, Carol?" I repeated, my voice now a low, dangerous rumble that I usually reserved for aggressive suspects. "Because it looks an awful lot like you were attempting to break into my car. And what exactly is that you've got tucked away behind your pristine white pants?" The movement of my eyes forced her gaze down. She clutched the tool tighter, and her cheeks flushed an angry, mottled red that didn't quite reach her perfectly bronzed forehead. The moment the accusation hung in the air, the flimsy facade of a concerned neighbor completely shattered. "Don't be ridiculous, Michael. That's a highly exaggerated claim," she huffed, her voice immediately hitting that shrill, grating register that made her so famous or infamous in the neighborhood. "This," she brandished the tool in the air for a second, a fleeting metallic blur, "is the master key for the development. The HOA has authorized me to conduct an inspection of this vehicle immediately, and frankly, I'm appalled. It has clearly been parked improperly according to Bylaw 3B, Section 4, Subsection 2, which mandates that all vehicles must be parked entirely within the delineated lines of the garage space or the driveway apron. Your left rear tire is nearly an inch over the imaginary line dividing your property from the common area." I stared at her, utterly speechless for a second. The brazenness of the lie, the sheer lunacy of her claim was breathtaking. I glanced at my tire. It was perfectly centered within the limits of my own private driveway. "The master key, Carol, you're telling me the HOA gave you a lock-picking tool to inspect vehicles by attempting to open them with brute force?" I felt a terrifying calm descend over me, the kind of stillness that precedes a hurricane. I knew what I needed to do, but I wanted to hear how deep this delusion went. "It's not a lock-picking tool, it's a universal access device. I was going to move the car into a proper position, of course. You know, for the betterment of the community, Michael. This is a very sensitive issue. I have the authority. And I'll have you know this vehicle also appears to have unauthorized non-conforming items visible through the window, which is against the aesthetic guidelines. Is that a ballistic vest I see in your passenger seat? That looks very unprofessional and brings down the property value. I demand you open the car so I can log all non-compliant items and remove them right now. This is for the HOA, she finished, her chest puffed out, her chin jutting defiantly. She took an aggressive step toward me, wielding the crudely fashioned master key like a conductor's baton. This wasn't just absurd, this was an active, criminal attempt, completely unhinged. This was officially going off the rails. The setting sun began to cast long, distorted shadows across the perfectly manicured lawn, lending a surreal, almost theatrical quality to the escalating confrontation. Carol, convinced of her absolute, unchallengeable authority, was now demanding I step aside so she could continue her illegal entry attempt. The sheer audacity was paralyzing, but only for a moment. My mind, trained to remain objective and process information under extreme stress, was already working through the legal implications. Attempted breaking and entering, unauthorized use of a tool designed for criminal intent, and most hilariously, completely baseless property claims. Step back, Carol, I said, my voice dropping even lower, now completely devoid of any conversational warmth. It was the tone of command, the one that usually meant someone was about to comply or face immediate lawful consequences. You are not an authorized law enforcement officer, you are not a locksmith, and that is not an HOA master key. That is a tool you were using to attempt to force entry into my private property. You have damaged my car and you are currently trespassing and attempting a felony. I took another deliberate step closer, making sure she understood that the game was over, that she had crossed a line that even HOA presidents couldn't ignore. She recoiled slightly, her eyes widening for a fleeting second before the defensive wall of her entitlement shot back up, stronger than ever. The mention of a felony seemed to only fuel her delusion, as if I had merely given her a new, exciting challenge to overcome. She didn't retreat, instead she did the exact opposite. She advanced, pointing the crude metal pick at my chest. How dare you? I'll have you know, Michael, I have the entire board behind me. You are resisting a lawful inspection by a duly appointed HOA representative, and I am tired of your insolence and that vest. It's a health and safety hazard and an aesthetic blight. The noise started to draw attention. Mrs. Henderson from across the street, a notorious gossip, had paused, her gardening trowel frozen midair, a look of shocked, delighted horror spreading across her face. Mr. Patel and his son were peeking out from behind their screen door, drawn by the sound of Carol's increasingly shrill voice. A small but growing audience was forming, their collective presence amplifying the pressure and the drama of the situation. This was no longer a private spat, it was a public spectacle, exactly what Carol craved, but I was about to turn the stage against her. I'm giving you one final chance to step away from my vehicle and return to your property, Carol, I warned, my voice flat, holding the line. If you do not, I will be forced to call the authorities and file a full report complete with the damage you've caused. I gestured pointedly at the fresh scratch on the door panel, a visible testament to her misguided efforts. The word authorities seemed to be the trigger that finally snapped whatever rational wire she had left. She let out a laugh that was more of a high-pitched, triumphant shriek. Oh, you think you can threaten me with the police? That is the richest thing I've heard all day. I am the one with the community's best interests at heart. You know what, Michael? I don't trust you, and I certainly don't trust whatever non-compliant items you have in your car. I'm calling them right now. They'll be here in 5 minutes and they will take my side because they will respect the authority of the homeowners association. With a theatrical flourish, she dug into the pocket of her pristine white capris, pulling out a gleaming, expensive smartphone. Her fingers flew across the screen, her lips moving rapidly as she began to speak into the phone, her voice thick with fake panic and exaggerated distress. Yes, 911. I need an officer dispatched immediately to 1422 Willow Crest Drive, she declared, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear every perfectly enunciated word. I have a trespasser here, a highly uncooperative individual who is obstructing a lawful community inspection. He has a suspicious, unauthorized vehicle parked on common property, and he's refusing to let me access it with my authorized master key. He appears to be attempting to impersonate a law enforcement officer. I can see what looks like a bulletproof vest in his car. He is extremely agitated and threatening to call the police on me. I feel completely unsafe. Please hurry. I stood there completely motionless, the afternoon sun beating down on the back of my neck. I listened to her complete the call, every ridiculous self-aggrandizing lie, every ludicrous embellishment designed to paint me as the aggressor, the menace, the unstable element in her perfect neighborhood tableau. She hung up the phone with a triumphant snap, her gaze locking onto mine, a look of vindictive satisfaction glittering in her eyes. "There," she announced, placing her hands firmly on her hips. "The police are on their way, Michael. I hope you enjoy explaining yourself. You are in for a very rude awakening when they arrive." The utter mind-numbing irony of the situation hit me with the force of a physical blow. The irony was so profound it was almost beautiful. A slow, deliberate smile began to spread across my face, a smile that must have looked utterly terrifying to Carol, as it clearly contained no amusement. I reached into my briefcase, which was still resting on the driveway right next to my left foot. I didn't say a word. I just watched her, allowing the silence and the anticipation to build, knowing that her world was about to come crashing down around her with the force of a legal judgment. Mrs. Henderson was practically vibrating with anticipation across the street. Carol looked like a conquering hero, convinced she had won the day. It was time for the curtain call, the moment of truth that was going to destroy her fragile, self-constructed empire of authority forever. The silence that fell after Carol's dramatic 911 call was heavy, punctuated only by the distant, high-pitched whine of the neighborhood sprinkler systems and the quickening breaths of the growing number of witnesses. Carol stood her ground, radiating smug confidence, her eyes fixed on the end of the street, waiting for the cavalry, the police she had just summoned to validate her nonsensical claims. Her master key pick was still clutched tightly in her hand, a pathetic symbol of her utterly fake authority. I slowly knelt down, keeping my movements deliberate and easy to read, ensuring no sudden movement could be misconstrued. Though Carol was clearly beyond rational thought, I unzipped the briefcase and didn't even bother to pull out the sensitive paperwork. I went straight for the two items that mattered most. First, I pulled out my official duty belt, the weight of the sidearm and the equipment familiar and comforting. Second, and most importantly, I lifted out the very object she had complained about, the unauthorized, non-conforming item that was a health and safety hazard. I stood up, holding my ballistic vest, my official department-issued heavy-duty protective equipment, in front of me, the dark blue fabric. The patches on the front and back, clearly identifying me as a deputy sheriff of the county, were impossible to ignore. The yellow-on-blue lettering was crisp, bold, and authoritative. Carol's triumphant smirk completely froze on her face. Her eyes, which had been darting between the street and me, now fixated on the vest, traveling slowly from the reinforced shoulder straps to the bold lettering. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her skin a pasty, sickly white. "You called the police, Carol," I stated, my voice completely flat like cold steel. I laid the vest carefully on the hood of my sedan, letting the full weight and meaning of the object sink into her consciousness. "And I appreciate you making the effort, because now this becomes an official, documented event, not just a neighbor dispute." I reached back into the briefcase and pulled out the small, highly polished leather folder. I flipped it open, revealing the gold and silver star of my badge nestled securely against my laminated photo identification card. I held it up for the rapidly assembling crowd to see clearly, ensuring every witness had a good view. "For the record, Carol, and for the benefit of our neighbors," I announced, raising my voice just enough to carry over the quiet street, "my name is Deputy Sheriff Michael Thorne, and this is my residence and my lawfully registered private vehicle." I let the title hang in the air, heavy and undeniable. "That," I continued, pointing a finger at the master key clutched in her trembling hand, "is not an HOA tool. It's a crude lock-picking implement you were attempting to use to break into my car. You have caused property damage," I pointed to the scratch. "You have made a false police report, and you are attempting a criminal act against a law enforcement officer's property." Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly like a fish out of water. She tried to speak, but only a desperate, choked gasp came out. She looked at the vest, then at the badge, then desperately to Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Patel, who were now pointing and whispering with a newfound, gleeful intensity. The conquering hero's facade had crumbled. She was now a terrified woman caught in the act. In the distance, the first faint wail of a siren began to grow louder. It wasn't the police. It was the sheriff's department, my colleagues responding to a 911 call regarding a suspicious person impersonating a police officer. As the patrol car, lights flashing and siren chirping, rounded the corner and approached my house, I reached into the breast pocket of my shirt and pulled out my department-issued radio. "Show me 10-8, 1422 Willow Crest Drive. I have the suspect detained," I calmly spoke into the radio, using the formal code that immediately identified me to the responding officers. The patrol car, recognizing the voice and the call sign, slowed to a stop. Two uniformed deputies, young and professional, stepped out, their faces initially set in a serious, ready-to-engage expression. They stopped dead in their tracks the moment they saw me, my badge displayed, my vest on the car hood, and the pathetic figure of Carol standing a few feet away, her face a picture of absolute, dawning horror. "Deputy Thorne, is everything 10-4? one of the deputies, Officer Ramirez, asked, slightly confused, but instantly understanding the gravity of the situation. I nodded, gesturing toward Carol. Negative, Officer Ramirez, I have a situation here. This individual, Carol Henderson, attempted to gain unlawful entry into my private vehicle using this. I tapped the master key that Carol had finally dropped onto the driveway, resulting in property damage. Furthermore, she fabricated a 911 call, claiming I was impersonating an officer and threatening her. I need you to place Ms. Henderson under arrest for attempted felony breaking and entering, criminal property damage, and filing a false police report. Carol finally found her voice, a desperate, pathetic squeak. But I'm the HOA president, I have authority, you can't do this, I was just trying to move the car, it's your fault for parking improperly. Your authority ends where the law begins, Carol, I said, watching as the deputies, after a brief shocked look at each other, moved to carry out my order. Ramirez produced her handcuffs, and the law clearly states that even an HOA president cannot attempt to break into private property, especially not based on an inch of imaginary parking line and a delusional belief in a master key. That vest you were so concerned about is my professional gear. The documents in the car are my official case files. You didn't just target a neighbor, you targeted the property of the county sheriff's department. As the cuffs clicked shut around her wrists, Carol let out a final, raw wail of utter defeat. The neighbors watched in stunned silence as the HOA queen was read her rights and escorted into the back of the patrol car she herself had summoned. Justice, I reflected as I watched the taillights disappear down the street, wasn't always a speedy process, but sometimes on a hot Tuesday afternoon in the middle of a mundane suburb, it came with the satisfying, inevitable click of cold steel. The neighborhood would be very quiet for a long time.